Stories are the most powerful thing on earth. They are literally life and death. Wars are waged based on the story of who is the hero and who is the villain. You are the result of a story your parents told each other, the one-night stand, the soulmate, and friends who became so much more. Life and death. So wouldn't you like to understand them better, these stories? How Story Works, an elegant guide to the craft of storytelling by Lani Diane Rich, demystifies stories and helps you understand why you love what you love, why you hate what you hate, and why prologues are almost always a bad idea. How Story Works by Lani Diane Rich. Available on Amazon in ebook, audiobook, and paperback form. Get your copy today.
So, Noelle, if you went to high school on a hellmouth, what metaphorical monster would you have turned into?
A harpy. They steal your food and then poop on it. You?
Wait, no. They steal your food and then poop on it?
The ancient Greeks were weird. What kind of monster would you be?
I don't know. I mean, what kind of monster is painfully insecure and always joking to cover up an innate sense of worthlessness?
A really ineffective troll? Go ahead, cross the bridge. I'm not asking you any questions. I'll just be here alone with my goats.
Ooh, goats!
Welcome to Still Pretty, a Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast. I'm loony fringe film scholar Noelle LaCroix.
And I'm research girl and story expert Lani Diane Rich of Chipperish Media.
And we're here today to talk about Out of Mind, Out of Sight, the 11th episode of Season 1. Out of Mind, Out of Sight was written by way too many people. Story by Joss Whedon, Matt Kine, Joe Ragmeyer, Rob Deshotel, and Dean Batali are all story editors. And writing team Ashley Gable and Thomas A. Swindon wrote the teleplay. Riza Bedi is the director, and this is the only episode of Buffy he will direct.
A warning before we begin, every episode of Still Pretty talks about each episode within the greater context of all of Buffy, and as such is fully spoiled. All right, before some invisible malevolent force pushes you down the school steps, let's go on patrol. In Out of Mind, Out of Sight, Cordelia is campaigning to be named May Queen at the prom, and Buffy remembers the life she had to give up to become the Slayer.
Yeah, what kind of moron would I be May Queen anyway?
I was.
You what?
When Mitch, Cordelia's date for the dance, is brutally attacked with a baseball bat by an invisible force, the Scoobies suspect the Hellmouth is at work again and get on the case. Buffy finds a message on the lockers where he was attacked and shares it with her friends.
Look, that's all it said?
Look at what? Look at Mitch?
Maybe. All I know is it's a message.
Next, Cordelia's best friend Harmony falls down the stairs at school and insists an invisible force pushed her. Buffy follows the sound of a girl's laughter into the empty band room and is bumped into by something she couldn't see.
I touched the thing, but it didn't go through me. It bumped into me, and it wasn't cold.
So we're talking about what, an invisible person?
A girl. She laughed.
A girl on campus with the ability to become invisible.
That is so cool.
While Buffy follows up on Cordelia, Angel arrives in the library to talk to Giles about what's going on with the Master. Something big is coming, and Giles needs a missing codex to figure out what it is.
It's reputed to have contained the most complete prophecies about the Slayer's role in the end years. Unfortunately, the book was lost in the 15th century.
Not lost. Misplaced. I can get it.
The Scoobies figure out that the attacker is Marcy Ross, a girl who felt invisible and thanks to the mystical transformative power of the Hellmouth, became literally invisible. When Cordelia's favorite teacher is attacked and another message is left behind, it's clear that Cordelia, for once, is right to think she's the center of everything.
Somebody is after me. They just tried to kill Mrs. Miller. She was helping me with my homework. And Mitch and Harmony. This is all about me. Me.
Wow, for once she's right.
Buffy agrees to protect Cordelia and stop Marcy, but Marcy gets the jump on them, knocking them both out and tying them up in the backstage. Meanwhile, Giles, Xander, and Willow are locked in the school basement with the gas turned on. Luckily, a certain non-breathing vampire comes to the rescue.
I came in through the basement. I smelled the gas.
So we will shut it off, otherwise the whole building will go up.
I'll get it. It's not like I need the oxygen.
At the Bronze, Buffy and Cordelia wake up tied to chairs as invisible Marcy pulls out a tray of surgical equipment, intent on slashing Cordelia's perfect face. Buffy frees herself from her bonds and uses her other senses to locate Marcy. She knocks her out. At that moment, a handful of creepy men in black collect Marcy and drag her away.
It's happened at other schools.
We're not at liberty to discuss that.
It would be best for you to forget this whole incident.
Do you know that you guys are very creepy?
Cordelia does her best to thank Buffy for saving her, but gives in to peer pressure instead, once again insulting the Scoobies and walking off with her coterie. And somewhere in a government building, an invisible Marcy starts her new life in a new school. Also full of a bunch of invisible kids.
Welcome, Marcy.
Hey.
Class, this is Marcy.
Hi, Marcy.
Sit down.
All right, so Noelle, out of
Yes.
mind, out of sight. What did you think?
I really like this episode a lot, mostly because it's so clear with its theme right off the bat, so to speak. Oh, an unintentional pun. That's
Right.
terrible.
Because it's clear.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
I'm just going to, right off the bat, I'm just going to laugh at my own jokes this entire episode. I've got, we're queued up with jokes for this one.
Okay.
Dad jokes all the way down.
Dad
Sorry.
jokes all the way through.
But yes, I feel like the invisible outcast we establish right away works really well. I dig it. How do you feel about this episode?
Okay. It's never been one of my favorites, but it's never been like one that I've hated. I think that there's a lot of stuff going on here that I actually do really like. I like the clarity, again, with the clear pun for the invisible girl, but whatever. The clarity of this metaphor, that we really are following through on. You feel invisible, you become invisible, that the Hellmouth has that kind of transitive property, which I think is really kind of cool. And it's a cool sort of expansion of the Hellmouth mythology, which I really like. But overall, like, I think for me, mostly it's the ending. It's the Men in Black. It's like suddenly we're an episode of X-Files. Suddenly we've got these guys coming in this shadow government installation where invisible children, who apparently this happens on the Hellmouth. I guess Hellmouths all over the place around high schools where children are feeling invisible and becoming invisible, and now they're going to be trained to be assassins, which feels a little weird. It's a little more sci-fi than fantasy, which is the realm that Buffy is firmly in. And I don't know, that felt a little weird to me. But aside from that, I liked it. I liked what we have I like Cordelia. Cordelia's really great in this episode. And it's kind of nice to see Buffy sort of wistfully looking at the life that she could have had, that she would have been Cordelia, maybe a nicer Cordelia, but she would have been the Cordelia in her high school if she hadn't been a Slayer. So I kind of found that to be a nice sort of reflection between her and Cordelia. Cordelia having those moments of insight into what it is to be popular, that being popular does not mean that you're not lonely.
Yes.
But yet it's better than, being lonely all by yourself. So there's that, which I thought was really good.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff in here that I like, but it's always kind of one of those episodes where I'm like, okay, here we did a thing. That's fine. But I guess partially too, because it's not a Hellmouth monster. It is a kid, like a normal human kid who was affected by the Hellmouth, and here she is, invisible and missing for 6 months. Like, her parents must be losing their minds, not knowing where their kid is. I imagine a lot of parents in Sunnydale are going through huge amounts of trauma, considering how many kids die on a regular basis. And no kids died in this episode, so at least there was that. But it feels a little off to me for the Buffyverse, I think, for those reasons, because it does feel more sci-fi than fantasy, even though we do have that really great metaphorical transition going on.
Yeah, it's definitely I think it's the first episode of Buffy where the conflict is not really supernatural. It's more in the science fiction space. I mean, Giles explains it as metaphysics, doesn't he? Isn't there? Yeah, he explains it in scientific terms and not in supernatural terms. It's not that Marcy has the power to become invisible. It's that she lacks the power to make herself visible, as much as she tries.
Right.
So she is more a victim of, the hellmouthy fantasy element, but it's explained and then it's treated in a sort of scientific sense, but not really, because we don't get an explanation. But it really does feel like an episode of The X-Files at the end.
Yeah, no, it feels a lot more like an episode of The X-Files, which of course did traipse in that fantasy realm, but it was more in the sci-fi part of things, So yeah, I mean, it's a little bit weird. It's kind of one of those episodes that's sort of Buffy is still figuring out what it is, and my argument is that until Prophecy Girl, Buffy doesn't know what it is. Once we hit Prophecy Girl, which is the next episode that we're going to be looking at, once we hit that, Buffy is locked and loaded. It is what it is, and it knows what it is. And as we move into season 2, we're going to get a much more Buffy sense of Buffy. But this episode is just kind of one of those episodes that's just sort of a little bit weird. It's also, kind of it's written by people who are not going to be an extended part of the, Buffy behind the scenes. We haven't really established our main crew yet, but the vision of what Buffy is just hasn't really solidified yet. So we're in this like kind of weird amorphous space between X-Files and Buffy and how all this stuff, kind of works. So so there was some fun stuff in it though. So what did you see here? What struck you the most in this episode?
Well, this feels like a really great opportunity to dive into the queer subtext of Buffy.
No, I am so excited for that.
Absolutely. I am living for the queer subtext in this episode. I mean, was it yesterday that I said to you, this is about bisexual erasure, literally? And you said, what? And I said, oh yeah. But bisexual erasure is kind of a thing on Buffy.
Yeah.
And we'll see that especially when we start talking about Willow's entire sexuality arc. And I will have many, many things to say about that when we're more, in it and looking at how that's treated and the language around it and all that. But I think it's really interesting that here we have Clea Duvall, gay icon Clea Duvall, who if you were in high school in the late 90s. I mean, But I'm a Cheerleader is one of the like seminal pop cultural gay texts. And I think that that's a lot of people's association with Clea Duvall, who does identify as a lesbian. Not at this point in her career. This was, I think, 2 or 3 years before But I'm a Cheerleader. And, so that wouldn't have been on people's minds, but Clea Duvall has said about playing outsider characters that is what she's drawn to, that she tends to be drawn to that kind of character. So I know I think it was last time we talked about Death of the Author.
Right.
And, the intent behind a lot of these choices that get made for film and television. But I don't know, I don't know that textually Marcy is supposed to be queer, but I think it's interesting that we have a queer actress who has talked about really identifying with being the other and those characters that are on the fringe, that are on the outside, and are therefore more complicated.
Right. Well, I mean, the fact that like anything that Clea Duvall is in her personal life or anything like that is extra textual. So like in the actual text of the thing itself, I think you've got enough really interesting support for this argument. But it was funny because when you first mentioned it to me, I was like, what? No, because of course I'm been straight my whole life. And so because of that, there are certain things that I am not as likely to see, that other people might see more clearly. And so a lot of times when you bring these things up, I always feel like such an asshole because I'm like, no hey, you know what I mean? Like, I'm open to it, definitely. But it's something that honestly would never have occurred to me because I've grown up straight in a world that does erase anything else, you know? So like, I completely 100% stand behind this theory, you know, and I think there's lots of textual evidence for it, but
Absolutely.
I'm just admitting, you know, I'm just acknowledging to the world that that Noelle opens my eyes so much all the time, and it's awesome.
That's the bisexual agenda, by the way, everybody.
Right.
So, you know,
right.
Get your clipboards and your pamphlets.
Yes.
It's official. Okay. But that's, you know, it's perfect that you say that, because that is exactly the point of the episode, the queer subtext of the episode, I think. And, you know, exactly the problem that Marcy is running into is that she is, you know, the story is so heterocentrist, you know, assuming that everyone is heterosexual. And we start with this May Queen idea, which is kind of institutionalized heteronormativity, isn't it? I mean, a May Queen represents May Day. And I think it's interesting that in popular culture, and I'm certain that the writers and directors on the show would have been aware of The Wicker Man, the 1967 horror film that connects May Day with sexual deviance and occult rituals and human sacrifice. So,
well, I had no awareness of that, but that's awesome. Okay.
Okay. All right. The Wicker Man is fantastic. It's especially fantastic if you yourself identify as a sexual deviant. No, it's very interesting. I think it was probably more impactful when it was made, terroir and all that.
Sure.
But I think that especially in the suspense, I don't want to call Buffy horror, but in the sort of suspense fantasy space, you know, I think that the May Queen and the idea of May Day bring the Wicker Man and that sort of, you know, something not right is going on here to mind.
Okay, so but you're saying that the May Queen though is institutionalized heteronormativity, heterocentrism.
Yes.
But yet the Wicker Man Association brings in, I don't want to call it deviant, brings in alternatives, right? You know, So what is the argument that we're presenting an element of the May Queen that on its face, because it's the May Queen who's there with a boy and all that kind of stuff, that it's heteronormative, but that there are elements of, you know, of other alternative lifestyles underneath it?
Well, that there's something darker underneath it, that there's something darker underneath this idea of, you know, the May Queen. Sunnydale, I'm not sure this is how Sunnydale does it. In fact, we know it's not, because Cordelia's dress is not white, but, you know, the May Queen wears a white dress to symbolize purity and blah, 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 blah. But I think it's interesting that they use the May Queen. The wording is interesting to me, that it's the May Queen and not the prom queen.
Right.
Because that's clearly what we're talking about. And Buffy says, you know, well, we didn't call it the May Queen at her school in LA, but that's what it was. It's such an interesting detail, because why make it the May Queen if not to attach it to the idea of, you know, the image of May Day and, you know, possibly any sort of other eerie associations that, you know, people may have from the pop culture space. Because, of course, Buffy is also a show that's very aware of pop culture and how stories function within that larger pop cultural landscape. Yeah. So I think it stuck out to me because I think it would have been very easy for them to talk about, you know, the prom and being the prom queen. And we all have a sort of mental script for what that means. And I know that at some high schools, probably not in 1997, but at some high schools, prom king, prom queen, there's not a gender normative expectation there that anybody, that any student of any gender can be elected either one of those things. In 1997, probably not. Right. But still, it's more it's more open. I feel like the idea of a prom queen is more open-ended, maybe. A little bit less specific than a May Queen, and we have spent way too much time on the linguistic breakdown of this idea. But anyway, that jumped out at me, and regardless of any sort of implication of that language in and of itself, we have the girls talking about fashion,
right? And
what the dress is going to be, and then we have the boys' locker room talk.
Oh,
literally,
God. Yeah,
I know. I know. And I hate that. I hate that exchange so much. I hate it so much. Not because it's horrible and just gross, but because it's so clunky.
Yeah.
It's not her arm I'm looking to be on. What?
I know.
Ew.
It's just completely gross. And at that point, I'm like, all right, I'm kind of glad he got hit with a bat.
Yeah. Yeah. So then we have Mitch alone in the boys' locker room, and I'm like, yeah, hashtag feminism. Boys get attacked in locker rooms too.
Yeah, the locker rooms, I think we've established, are the most dangerous place.
They really
in the Buffyverse is the locker room.
They really are. Although, did you notice that the boys' locker room is a lot nicer than the girls' locker room?
No, I hadn't really noticed that. It didn't look that nice to me.
Well, I mean, it's still a locker room, but it's like spacious. And
look at the windows. There's no like light coming in, right?
Creepy flickering light. Yeah, no.
Fairly true. Yeah.
The patriarchy, everyone.
Yes, there you go.
Anyway, so Mitch is alone in the locker room after having this gross exchange with his gross friends, and then we hear feminine laughter in the boys' locker room, and Mitch says, "All right, fun time's over. Come out." And I'm like, "Oh, all right. Hello, queer narrative. Let's do this. This is, we talk about coming out, really?
Sure.
And then Marcy hits him. Marcy hits him with a phallic symbol, which I just adore. Hits him with his own heterocentrist patriarchal bat.
Right.
I don't know. But we are 4 minutes in at this point. We're 4 minutes in. We've talked about outcasts and privilege. We've talked about, we've had our vapid girls, our stereotypical, girls doing stereotypical girl talk. We've got toxic male sexuality, and we've couched everything in this very heterosexist, very heterocentric May Queen King celebration.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that is a lot of stuff unpacked from the first 4 minutes.
I mean,
good job. LaCroix. I like it.
Thank you. Yeah. I feel like it's really coming at it from a queer perspective as a queer person, but also as a fan of queer film theory, which looks for queer narratives in, all cinema and television, textually queer or otherwise. I mean, it feels very pointed to me.
Wow.
That we've got this girl who does not have a place in any of these spaces. I mean, even when she's in English class trying to make herself be seen, I mean, she's raising her hand. It's not that she's not hiding on purpose. She's trying to involve herself in the conversation that Cordelia and Harmony are having in the girls' bathroom. She's trying to answer questions in English class. It's really, Buffy says it, we did this to her. It really is others' failure, refusal to see and acknowledge her that turns her invisible.
Yeah.
So I feel just, especially, as I said already, within the larger context of Buffy and it's really gross by erasure. I feel like this is a little bit of that as well. And then when Marcy throws Harmony down the stairs, there's a little rainbow poster on the wall behind her. So
Wow.
You know.
I don't know. The more you bring this stuff up, the more I think, hey, maybe they knew what they were doing. But it is okay. Now you have Marcy as like a representative symbol of bi erasure.
Yeah.
She's obsessed with Cordelia. Do you
Yeah.
think that she was sort of in love with Cordelia?
I think that if you wanted to read it that way, if you wanted to read Marcy as the sort of psycho lesbian character, you could do that as well. I don't, because I mean, we can talk about that. But I think I don't, in part because of the greater context of the show, but also because Marcy's rage is equal opportunity.
Right.
I mean, her target is Cordelia, but she's violent toward people of all genders.
Right.
We could say she's bi-furious. I have been sitting on that dad joke this entire time. Noelle LaCroix.
I love
LaCroix, your bisexual dad, serving bisexual dad jokes. But I mean, her anger is, across the board. I mean, I think if she were going to be, if we were going to make her the trope of the psycho lesbian, which we've had since the 30s, probably longer, but on screen, that is a holdover from the Hays Code, where any sort of, and I'm using air quotes here, deviant sexuality had to be punished. You could never depict somebody, you could depict queer people on screen, and they often were present, but as villains.
Yeah.
And the sadistic, the sadistic, really calculating lesbian is one of those villains that you see an awful lot. And I think we do get some of that with Marcy, with her doctor's bag and her medical setup. I mean, she's deliberate in what she's doing.
And she's also, trying to maximize. She numbs Cordelia's face, not to stop the pain, but to keep her from passing out, because she wants her to be awake through the horror of it. Like that's seriously, because Marcy is sympathetic. When you see her in her flashbacks, right? We see these memories of her. She's trying to talk to people. She's trying to get Cordelia's attention. She's trying to get, the teacher's attention. She just feels invisible. Nobody sees her. So she's trying to keep herself from like fading off into nothing, but so she's sympathetic in those flashbacks, but she's also like so crazy and so evil. And there's that moment, of course, where Buffy stands up, right? And she says, I was feeling sorry for you. You've suffered, but now I just know you're a thundering loony, right? And so we see like Marcy cross that line into completely unsympathetic, in the course of this story, which is kind of interesting, is I hadn't really thought about it in terms of the Hays Code, of course, because I hadn't really thought about her sexuality at all, because I didn't feel like we had addressed that, except for I do think the way that she's always trying to get Cordelia's attention, like, out of all the flashbacks, 2 of the 3 flashbacks are her trying to talk directly to Cordelia and getting nothing, getting shut down entirely. But not just Cordelia, but also all the friends, So I think that's a kind of a really interesting read on this, that if she is, even subtextually, bisexual or lesbian or anything, that we have to make her completely unsympathetic.
Yeah.
She has our sympathy to a certain point.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's, we start the episode talking about the anger of the outcast in society. And I think that calling real justifiable anger is another aspect of how we erase people.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think we'll probably talk about this in a minute with mental illness.
Yeah.
Because Buffy has done this a couple times already with mental illness as grounds for evil or violent behavior.
Yes.
And I don't think that stops anytime soon. But we also, with this idea of anger as being crazy, is something that we do to people who have a legitimate complaint.
Yes.
You know, I'm thinking about feminists and Black Lives Matter protesters being told to calm down or be more polite.
Yeah.
That's tone policing.
Yeah.
That's discrediting the point by taking issue with the tone.
Exactly. And it's completely gaslighting elements, you know, people in society who have a real legitimate complaint but are not heard. They're not heard when they're polite.
Yeah.
You know, we're not heard when we're polite. So we get angry and we step up, and then they're like, oh, well, now you're crazy. You know, so it's one of these things that does erase anybody, you know, any marginalized group. You know, with that kind of painting them as crazy. And we actually see that happen in the English conversation, the English class conversation with Cordelia.
Yes.
And here we have a Black woman teacher, right, who is talking about Shylock, and Shylock in, I believe Shylock is Merchant of Venice, isn't it?
Yes.
And she's talking about Shylock, who is a Jewish person, a marginalized person within the context of that story, although we do see a lot of anti-Semitism throughout history. That's a whole other discussion. Also terrible. But what they do with Shylock is they make his Jewishness a big part of everything about him. It's basically his defining characteristic. And he's so evil because he wants this revenge. Right. You know? And here we have Cordelia basically representing this, you know, extremely privileged, extremely white, you know, Christian, right? You know, kind of empowered segment of society that will then look at that and say, you know, oh, it's just all about you. You know, why is this all about you? Why is Shylock being such a jerk about this whole thing? You know, without completely undermining what his legitimate complaint was, and the fact that nobody listens to anybody if they're being polite. You know, it just doesn't happen. So then we have this, you know, the thing that struck me in that scene was that we have this, you know, Black woman teacher who would be absolutely familiar with exactly the kinds of things that Shylock is dealing with.
Yes.
Kind of taking Cordelia's side. That's a really great point, Cordelia.
Yeah.
And I get that Cordelia is supposed to be funny. Like, we're supposed to look at Cordelia, who's like, it's like this time I ran over this girl with my bike, and she was all like, oh, it's about her ankle rather than my trauma, you know?
Yeah.
Like, we're obviously supposed to see Cordelia as ridiculous in that moment, but the complete lack of context for this teacher talking about this kind of situation, you know, it felt a little off to me. Did that feel off to you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was really, really uncomfortable for me. That was really unacceptable. I mean, it's a great depiction of white supremacy with, you know, here with Miss Miller and Cordelia. Not just with Cordelia in the way that she completely fails to understand privilege, but in the way she gets a cookie for doing the bare minimum.
Yes,
when she comes up
for doing the reading.
Yeah. She comes up to Miss Miller. She did her reading for English class, and Miss Miller is all, oh, it's so nice when someone does the reading. It's like,
no,
excuse me,
she does not get a cookie
kudos for doing what you're supposed to do.
Exactly.
That's not, you know, that's not how this works. So we've got, I mean, we could talk about the racial dynamics just in that scene for an hour.
Well,
if we wanted to.
Race erasure too. Like,
absolutely.
This teacher, you know, and here's the thing. I am glad to see a person of color getting work, an actor of color getting work. I'm always glad to see that. But at the same time, what it does is it brings in a context to this scene, which is completely missing from the scene. And my guess is that the teacher character was written that anybody could play, you know, it didn't matter. And that they chose to give the job to a Black woman, which I think is great, you know. But what we didn't do was then take another look at that scene and look at all of the context of that with this teacher. So this teacher is now, you know, Cordelia's favorite teacher. This teacher is not calling Cordelia out on any of her privilege, on any of that perspective, you know, even though we do have starting off the scene that she is talking, you know, very sympathetically with Shylock and like, how can we be more sympathetic to Shylock? But then Cordelia, with all of her privilege, comes in and says, oh, no, it's not about Shylock. Why is he making everything about him? And she's just thrilled because Cordelia did the reading. You know, so she's
blown away by Cordelia's unique perspective on Shylock when, you know, Cordelia has completely missed the point.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So I don't know. That whole scene I felt really uncomfortable with. I also did not particularly care for the fact that then, of course, the one person of color in the entire thing is, of course, the one who gets attacked and almost killed.
Yeah.
You know? And then, of course, is saved by the by the privileged white hero.
Privileged white character. It saves. Yeah.
Yes, the white savior. So there's a lot of things. Again, I don't think that stuff was intentional. My guess is, it wasn't, but it happened, and nobody thought anything about it.
Well, and that's still we say this all the time, but that's still problematic. It's still racist. If it happens and no one notices, it's almost more racist.
Yeah.
It's almost more racist because I don't see you at all. I don't see this Black woman's experience at all.
Yeah.
That, it's that we're erasing it so completely with this narrative about Cordelia and how privileged she is and how funny that is. And I mean, I love Cordelia. I love the way Cordelia stands up for herself throughout the series. I love the character that Cordelia becomes. But Cordelia here in this episode is not great. I mean, even with her understanding of, feeling lonely, being surrounded by people, and how kind of profound that is, she's still so blinded by her own privilege, that it's really, it's really icky.
Well, see, here's the thing. I don't mind that Cordelia is blinded by her privilege. I think that is something that we should be seeing. That is, she's white, she's wealthy, she is presumably, Christian. She has ticked all of the privilege boxes except for male, right? So she's got a high amount of privilege. She's a kid in high school. She's not going to see her privilege at this point. Okay, fine. I like that she's smart. I like that she's insightful. I like that she's tough. I like all of these things about Cordelia. And the thing is that when we see her, really like, swimming in her privilege, we do mock it. She is mockable. We make fun of her because she is so self-obsessed, because it is always about her, So I think that that's okay. Cordelia doesn't really bother me as much in this episode as the context around her bothers me, as what we're not doing, in that moment. We are making fun of her as the viewer because of the way that she's talking about Shylock, but the teacher gives her a cookie. Within the world, she's allowed to behave this way without anybody calling her out on it. Now, Xander regularly calls Cordelia out. I like that. Buffy and Willow see Cordelia, for what she is, and I like that. So Cordelia doesn't really bother me so much as the context around her in this.
Sure.
So another thing that we have kind of been talking about a little bit is this idea of mental illness as a separation, as you're a thundering loony, so now you deserve everything that you're going to get. And that's the thing is that it's not any mental illness that Marcy may or may not have, right? The thing about Marcy is that she is invisible, but her goal is not to become visible, right? Her goal is to get revenge on, I'm presuming she blames somehow Cordelia for making her invisible.
Yeah.
That somehow it's Cordelia's fault, even though all of the context in which she was invisible wasn't necessarily about Cordelia. She's trying to get Cordelia to see her, and Cordelia wouldn't. And so now she feels like that's why she's invisible, is my guess, right? Or she just hates Cordelia because Cordelia has a lot of things that make her, kind of hateable.
And Cordelia is hyper visible. I mean, as a person, Cordelia as a person who is popular and takes that responsibility very seriously.
Yes.
Cordelia is... everyone knows Cordelia, and no one knows Marcy. So
no one remembers Marcy.
Easy. It's. I mean, from the sort of more limited high school worldview, perhaps it makes sense to Marcy to target Cordelia.
Yeah. But I mean, this is the thing. Like what it is that makes Marcy unsympathetic is not whether or not she has mental illness, is not whether or not she is bisexual or lesbian. It is the fact that she is viciously attacking people, who are not trying to hurt her, right?
Yeah.
She is out for revenge. And so when Buffy justifies her lack of sympathy at this turn to mental illness as opposed to seriously bad and destructive behavior,
yes,
which are not necessarily associated. There are people who have no mental illness who do terrible things, and there are people with mental illness who do terrible things. It's not the mental illness that makes them do terrible things. It's being a bad person that makes you do terrible things.
Right.
And the association that it's the mental illness as the justification for lacking that sympathetic, element for Marcy kind of hit me the wrong way.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't care
absolutely.
for that. We have Cordelia in the beginning saying, I don't need the loony fringe vote.
Yeah.
So we have this repeated use of the word loony, which I'm guessing the writers probably thought was a funny word, But I think the greater context of it, and I mean, you're a thundering loony is kind of a funny line, I'll admit it. It's kind of a funny line. But the greater context of that is that we're not, hating on Marcy because she's a bad person making bad choices. We're hating on her now because we're justified in hating on her because she's, quote unquote crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, Marcy has a legitimate complaint. She tried to make herself seen and she was not seen. That doesn't give her the right to take her pound of flesh out of Cordelia's face, but it doesn't make her crazy either. It doesn't make her unstable. In fact, I think she's depicted as very deliberate, which to me is sort of the opposite of crazy.
Well, I mean, she's represented as, she's got that crazy laughter. She's got this, we hear her ranting to herself,
That's true.
Oh, Cordelia, is that what we absolutely paint her as mentally unstable. I think we absolutely do. But it's that we're not acknowledging her legitimate complaint. But also like she's choosing vengeance over restitution. She's choosing, rather than, being invisible and wandering around this school, she's going to find out about Giles and Buffy and Xander. She could have been sitting in on any one of those Scooby meetings talking about demons and vampires in the Hellmouth, right? We could have told a story about this girl desperately trying to restore herself being seen, but instead it's this wild vengeance story,
right?
With no context. We don't have as much context for Marcy throughout this as we do for Shylock and just the discussion of Merchant of Venice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Marcy is interesting too, in that she's invisible to herself.
Yeah.
That moment where she's revealed, where she starts to disappear in class, that's played as, she's terrified.
Yeah.
She's losing her sense of identity. So she can't see who she really is either.
Yeah.
And I think that adds to, I don't think that was the intent on the part of the show, but I like the idea that she loses her humanity because she can't see herself anymore. And we get a little reflection of that, with Angel when he shows up in the library and he's talking to Giles and he says, Giles is, realizing that, a vampire, has no reflection and is so funny. I'm going to interrupt myself to say I just love Giles in that scene.
I love Giles in that scene.
He's so cute. He's so flustered around Angel.
I know.
He's like,
and I love Giles and Angel. I actually love that scene a ton. Angel comes in. He's avoiding Buffy because he can't be around her because he has these feelings for her.
Yeah.
A vampire in love with a slayer. It's rather poetic in a maudlin sort of way. Giles expressing that, understanding of what Angel is going through, and the thing is that Angel is an adult man. Angel is 200 years older than Giles. Angel's been around, so for them connecting as adult men, I thought was kind of nice. And I liked that, when Angel says looking in the mirror every day and seeing nothing there, it's an overrated pleasure. That's such an interesting kind of thing, to not see yourself, to not know what you look like, and when he says it's an overrated pleasure.
Yeah.
I find that a really interesting way of expressing that. And I love that Angel has that kind of depth, that he has such, and we see this with Angel throughout the rest of the show. Like the Angel that we got in the early episodes is not real Angel. Like this is real Angel. Real Angel is thoughtful and smart and empathetic. And he doesn't wig out because he's seen everything and like nothing scares him anymore.
Yeah.
So I really like that. I like that he has the access to the codex that Giles needs in order to figure out what the Master is doing. So we're kind of bringing the Master back in, kind of weaving him in before we get to our finale next week.
Yeah.
So I loved everything with Angel.
That was so great. I love that scene between them and Angel's. I mean, I think we're really starting to get a truer picture of who Angel is and his sort of poetic sorrow over not being able to. And I think does Giles even call it poetic? He's a vampire in love with a Slayer, and it's kind of,
it's rather poetic.
Yeah. I love that scene so much.
I think it's really great. I think it's one of the strongest scenes in here, and it's not really about, it's sort of folding in the overall story, the big season-long story, just kind of getting a little piece of it in here so that we can get to the prophecy that will, of course, be huge in next week's episode. But it's just a really nice moment. It's beautifully acted by both of these guys. And then I love when Angel shows up later and he can turn off the gas because he doesn't need to breathe.
Yeah.
He shows up because he has the codex, because he's bringing the codex to Giles. And so I just really kind of liked having him in the background, having him, interacting with Giles and with Willow and with Xander, and kind of being part of that team, And
we have him as he's a nice counterpoint to Marcy in that he is also an outcast sort of a figure. He's a different sort of bi in that he's a vampire with a soul. He's not human. He's not really, he's not fully human. He's not really fully a vampire either. Or else he's
in
both
that in-between
at the same
space.
time. And Angel could have easily decided to take his isolation and inability to really fit into any of these spaces out on society. He could have said, well, fuck all y'all. I'm just going to go cut up some people's faces or what. He could have done that, but he has lost his reflection. He can't see himself, but he is actively choosing. And I think you talk about this when you talk about Angel, the series, that he's actively choosing to do what he does and behave in the ways that he behaves. Which is a nice, again, a nice counterpoint to Marcy choosing violence as a response to her anger. I mean, I had one more, it sort of loops us back around, but one more thing to say about the depiction of mental illness and Marcy is that, when Buffy discovers Marcy's little nest, I mean, it's just, first of all, it just breaks my heart. I mean, her fire blanket and her little like kitchenette area, and she's got a teddy bear, and it just because
she's a child. Like that's the thing. Like we're not acknowledging that she is a child.
Yeah, but it made me think about homelessness, and people experience homelessness are in many parts of the country. Suffering with mental illness or members of the LGBTQ community, especially kids
who run away, right?
Yeah, or who are kicked out of their house. We wonder why Marcy's parents, we hear nothing about Marcy's parents. She's missing. She's been missing for 6 months. It's possible that she was not welcome at home either.
Wow.
It's 10%. It's about 10% of the general youth population that identify as LGBTQ. But it's 40% of the population of young people experiencing homelessness who identify as being part of that community. And there are lots and lots of reasons for that. But one of those reasons is that kids get kicked out of their homes. So she has made, we've got this girl who, I I really, really read hard into that queer narrative of the girl who is invisible even in her own home, so much that she's living, in the school.
That's so dark and sad.
It's really sad. It's really sad.
Oh,
yeah.
God,
Marcy's a tragic figure. And I think that, that's the problem that is one of the many problems with the tropes of, what makes a villain in a story.
Right.
Somebody who is an outcast for whatever reason, whether it's their race, their religion, their sexual orientation, their ability, whether, their able-bodiedness or not, or their able-mindedness or not, that those are the things that we call out in fiction as, oh, well, this person is mentally ill, therefore this person is evil.
Right. Well, it justifies our, mainstream society's general approach of further isolating these people, right? Because they're crazy, because they've got all these problems, because but it's interesting though with Marcy, because one of the things, we do get themes of vengeance later on in Buffy. And one of the things with Buffy is that it's not a story about vengeance. It's a story about protection. Buffy's role, if there's a bad person who has done multiple bad things, who's killed a ton of people, but isn't going to do that anymore, they get a pass, right? Angel has killed I don't even know, hundreds of people, thousands probably over the years, right? And yet, because he has a soul now and he's not going to do that anymore, he gets a pass. When Spike gets his chip and he physically cannot hurt a human, he gets a pass, right? So Buffy is not a story about vengeance. We do talk about vengeance a little bit with Anya, because of course she's a vengeance demon, but she is then made human, and once she's made human and she can't indulge that vengeance anymore, we kind of don't talk about it that much until I think season 7 we start talking, season 6, so season 7 we start talking a little bit more about the role of vengeance and what vengeance does. Here we just have this child who has been isolated, who's been made invisible, who's been ignored, and now is homeless, right? Has not gone home for whatever reasons, but I think reading into it that, she got kicked out for being, for being queer or whatever is definitely a possibility given the subtext that we've got in this episode. So you have this kid who's been through all this stuff, and she is choosing vengeance. She is choosing that over trying to resolve her situation, trying to be visible again. That doesn't even seem to be an option. That's not what she's going after.
Yeah.
If there was some way that she could magically steal Cordelia's visibility and bring it onto her own and make Cordelia invisible, you would understand a little bit more. It still wouldn't be okay that she's, tormenting Cordelia. But if that's what her goal was, I think you would understand it a little bit more. But instead, what we do is just say she is other. She's bad, she's loony, she's invisible, she's queer, or whatever it is, and we isolate her and put her on the fringes and call her crazy. Yeah. So I don't know. I think that was kind of interesting. All right. So do we have any arg the patriarchy moments for this one?
Well, we've got Xander talking about how great it would be to be invisible so he could protect the girls' locker room.
Oh, God. I know. It's so gross.
It's so gross. And
it's so gross.
I want to like Xander in this episode so much. I really want to, because he's got that great, maybe it's a vampire bat.
Maybe it's a vampire bat. I love that. I love his whole research boy when he comes out with the information and he's like there, he's got some capability there, which I really love.
So proud of himself. And and we also get a nice little peek into Xander's home life with Mom's making her famous call to the Chinese place.
Does your house even have a stove?
Yeah,
right.
I'm not sure we got into it when we talked about iRobot Eugene, but Xander's, we find out a little bit about Xander's family, that his, he's got a janitor in the, someone in his family was a janitor. Was it his uncle? Was a janitor, and that's how he knows this building. So we've got a little bit of that. Xander's home life, Xander is maybe there's poverty in Xander's world. And we're getting little clues about that. And I liked that moment, the way that he sort of jokes about, his mom not cooking.
Right.
That there's not going to be a home cooked meal. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into that as well. That is my role here on Still Pretty. No. I'm just going to read too much.
I don't think reading too much. I think you're seeing things. I think that you have your superpowers being able to see. And I like that you see these things. I mean, every now and again I'm not going to agree, but I mean, I think that what you see is what you see in the text, and it's always interesting. And yeah, I mean, Xander does have, we are of course throughout the course of the story going to find out that Xander has kind of a tragic home life. It is not good. It is absolutely at least verbally and emotionally abusive, if not physically abusive. And so you do see that Xander comes from this background that is a little dark, and the fact that his uncle is a janitor is not a big deal. It just means he's one of these blue collar workers, which is great. I mean, people work and that's fine. But I think that we do get the sense, I mean, I think there was something that he said about, his uncle losing the job or something like that. There was some kind of darkness in that story as well, kind of hinted at. So I think that, with everything that Xander's got going on, stuff that we have only sort of hinted at this point in the story and stuff that we of course are going to discover later, it can definitely give you sympathy for him, that a lot of these jokes that he makes, even when they're gross, I'm going to protect the girls' locker room, that he runs to humor as a defense mechanism. I mean, it's it's fairly clear in his characterization, and in situations like that, my sympathy for him, even when he's making these really gross jokes, is heightened because he's really just whatever the first funny thing that comes to mind. And as somebody who has made throughout her lifetime a lot of really, really poor jokes in exactly that vein, right? I'm just looking for something fun to say. I'm looking to amuse people. I'm looking to be cute. And I will say things. I have said things that I do not mean, the implications of which are gross and not good. And I've written things in my books with the same thing. I've done this. I know what that is. So I have a lot of sympathy for Xander. Overall, there's a lot of his behavior that does need and require a severe side eye, but at the same time, I sympathize with it. I sympathize with that need to make the joke, you know, at all costs.
Yep. And maybe it's a vampire bat. I'm sorry, but that is great. That is a great joke. And maybe no one laughs. I am so mad at all of them in that moment. I laughed much harder than I really should have alone in my house at that joke.
I thought it was great. I thought it was great.
Yeah, I love that moment. I mean, and there are a lot of little things that I love in this episode too. I love Harmony so much.
Yeah, Harmony. Oh my God, I love Harmony. And the thing is, we haven't even seen Mercedes McNabb as Harmony.
Oh God.
It's just playing the normal, the very flat, popular girl's best friend. But we're going to see so much of Harmony, which is so fantastic. And I love seeing Harmony, even when she's not given anything interesting to do. She just gives me joy.
Because it's coming.
Because I know
it's coming. It's so good. I love Harmony.
Her so much.
But there are a bunch of great little things in this episode. The something that just jumped out at me is really weird, but also kind of fun and cool. And I really, really want people to talk about this on Discord and the forums. The textbook at the very end, when Marcy is in her invisible kid rehabilitation program.
I don't think it's rehabilitation.
No. Well, and presumably they're all naked. Did you think about that?
Do their clothes become invisible as soon as they put them on?
I don't think so, because the cloth, it's not what's touching you, because Marcy's able to touch, we see floating knives.
The bat, right?
And then the bat. And when Buffy kicks the curtain down or kicks her into the curtain and the curtain falls over her, it doesn't disappear when it touches her.
And gives her she must be naked through this whole thing.
Yeah. So these kids are all going around naked. I think that's an interesting little detail there.
God.
I don't know.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that.
Yeah. Jeez. The vulnerability of the outcast, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, the textbook at the end, the text that is in that book are the lyrics to "Happiness is a Warm Gun" by the Beatles.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, I hadn't even noticed that.
No, I mean, this is the literary scholar in me coming out, but I always want to know if there's writing. I want to know,
yes.
What does it say?
What is the writing?
What does it say? What's the writing? So I paused it and I'm like, that is the lyrics to "Happiness is a Warm Gun" by the Beatles.
That is really interesting.
So, yeah, so people who, all of our music scholars, and, I know we have people in the Chipperish community who are all over the music appreciation and theory and, musical history. I want to know, tell me everything you know about that song because, I've got Google, but I trust your brains.
But I'd rather have these people. I know the Discord
I'd rather have
chat,
their very
the stuff that
smart
people
brains.
are bringing into the Discord chat has been so fantastic. There's such incredible insight happening there. It's a great place. So I'm looking forward to our Chipperettes in Discord. Bringing us some more insight into that. That's going to be really great. All right. So what's your girl power moment of the week?
My girl power moment of the week. There are actually several. I think. For me, it's Buffy's just her incredible. What do I want to say here? I didn't write this in the notes, so now I'm like off the top of my head. There are several girl power moments of the week. I love it when Buffy goes up to when Buffy finds Marcy's nest and realizes that she was right about this girl, that she had. Buffy's got this deep empathy.
Yeah.
And I really, really love that. I mean, I think it's too bad that that's undercut at the end with the, you're a thundering loony. But I really love that Buffy is the one who identifies to the group that, no, we did this to her. This isn't something that she did to herself. We did this to her. This is our fault. But also understands... she understands enough of what's going on with Marcy to figure out what happened. I love that. I also love when Marcy is pulling Cordelia up through the ceiling of the mop closet and Buffy just does this just grabs onto a pipe and does a pull up, just pulls herself up. It's wonderful female strength. I love it. Makes me happy.
She's really tough. I love that. I love when that moment where she can't see Marcy, and she's just like, she tells Cordelia to be quiet and she just senses her. She uses that she's been training, she's getting a sense of everything. It's not vampire, this is human. It's invisible human, but it's human, but she's able to figure out where Marcy is, cover her up in the curtain, and then of course the guys come in and take her. But it's just that nice moment where Buffy is taking control of the situation and she's fighting back. It's really, really nice. I like that. And that brings me to my favorite part of the episode is that moment. The way that it's shot, it's just so pretty. And Buffy says, Cordelia, shut up. And then it goes and then it goes all quiet and she like stands up into the light and she's got this beautiful halo of light behind her and there's like wind in the bronze. Right. But I'm so fine with it because it's just such a pretty shot and there's just like, you just see her like, reaching out with her feelings and, using the force and whatever. Yes. It's wonderful. It's really nice. Beautiful shot. And then we have this moment of silence and then Marcy makes a little noise and she turns around and whacks her. But oh my God, I love that. I love everything about that moment. No, it is. It's a really, really good. What about you, Lani? What's your favorite part? For me, my favorite part is Cordelia. I actually really like Cordelia. I like that we gave Cordelia, instead of just making her the bitchy mean girl, which is kind of what we've been doing throughout, is we gave her like intelligence and insight, and we made her character a little more interesting, a little more layered, a little more nuanced. And even though, like, let's face it, it's still Cordelia, there's not a lot of nuance there yet, right? But I like that. I like her a lot. Yeah, and she's the pretty popular girl, but she's not dumb. But she's not She figures out what's going on with Buffy and the group. Yeah. And she knows to come to Buffy for help. I really like that. I like that too. All right, that's it for today. To join in the discussion on Twitter, follow me at Lani Diane Rich and Noelle at Noelle Aloud, and use the hashtag StillPretty. You can also visit the Chipperish forums. Go to chipperish.com, click on forum, and join in the fun.
Or you can keep Chipperish Media going to the tune of $1 a month or more and gain access to the live chat in Discord, where you can hang out with me and Lani and all the Chipperish patrons who will sign your yearbook with something better than "Have a nice summer." And really, guys, get your butts to Discord. If you're a patron and not there, get in there because it's amazing. People have fantastic insight. It's awesome. Visit patreon.com/chipperish to find out more.
You can also show your support for Still Pretty by going to Apple Podcasts and giving us a review. That's one of the most effective ways to show support for your favorite podcasts. Or you can use your social media platform of choice to tell your friends about us. Word of mouth is a powerful thing.
We will be back next time with Prophecy Girl,
Yay!
the 12th episode of Season 1, which is also the Season 1 finale.
Yes.
Until then, this is all about us. Us, us, us.